Hey, so I wanted to just record a quick video because I've gotten a few inquiries in regards to shadow priests who feel like they are doing incorrect DPS and they wanted some help. First things first, I think that people might be a little bit skewed in terms of what they expect to be doing DPS wise. I don't consider myself an expert in shadow priests whatsoever. And I kind of just say that because when it comes to my approach to playing my class, even though I do, of course, pay attention to rotation and I try to maximize my movement as much as possible, I am not good at theory crafting, so I get all of my information from howtopriest.com. I will provide a link in the information box and probably include some sort of pop-up that emphasizes that website. It's an amazing resource. They do so much theory crafting there. They provide in-depth explanations for everything, and they just have all of the numbers and all of the important information you need to know as to why they came to the conclusion that something is better than something else. And a lot of the information that people are kind of curious about or are doing wrong in their rotation is basically listed on the website there. I do advise for people to check that website whenever there's a new patch coming out, because I actually forgot to check the website when one of the patches came out in the past, and it turns out that I think they were prioritizing mastery second over haste for a while early on in Legion, and then somewhere in there they kind of changed it around where critical strike became more important, and I actually didn't know that for weeks after playing the patch. So when I went on the website randomly out of the blue, I felt kind of ashamed for not knowing that ahead of time. But yeah, that website is an excellent resource. They also have trinket comparison charts, because trinkets can be really difficult to know when it's best to use one over the other. What I've always done is that I tend to just keep a lot of the gear that I get. I hoard them because there are times where items change or stats change and then something ends up becoming better than the other. Plus, since I did a lot of Mythic Plus, there were times where you wanted to use AoE trinkets compared to single target, so it's always good to keep them all and also store them in a gear set. That way you can always swap between them with a keybind if you want to try hard like that. But yeah, so there would be people who would be coming to me asking why they're not doing as much DPS as they should. So for example, there was somebody that was coming to me with 905 equipped item level, and they would be a little disappointed that they weren't reaching higher numbers of DPS. So in that case, I think it's important to understand that if it's not your main character, that already by itself means that you're not dedicating as much time on it. And in a game, in an expansion like Legion, I feel like as the time that you can dedicate to a character is very important with all the factors like artifact power and legendaries. So 905 item level equip is already extremely low for what is current right now. When I quit, I think people were almost 940 equipped and I was 935. Currently my character is 935. Obviously I have not been playing, but 935 is the eye level I was at. So if you check some of the recent videos that I was releasing, that is kind of a good indicator for what the DPS was like at the time. I only have my information to compare things to. So for something like 905, I just don't want people to feel discouraged about their damage, especially if they're not in a situation where you can compare with someone else that does higher damage than you just because of their gear. I know that that can be hard to not have that expectation when you're playing the game all the time and you want to be doing competitive DPS, and it's very easy for you to compare yourself to what you're seeing. But that is just really an important thing to consider, that legendaries are extremely important. The tier 24 piece is extremely important, and just if you're missing a lot of equipped item level, you can't expect yourself to be doing as much. There was also another case recently. I was just talking to him today through comments about how he has 920 equipped item level and he hasn't pushed past 1 million single target DPS yet. At first, I did provide incorrect information back where I said that I thought at the time for 920 that you wouldn't be able to surpass 1 million, but if you check my videos for Mythic Plus around the July range, June-July range seems to be when I was around 922 eye level. I know that because I was checking WoW progress for 7.2.5 and there were several keys that I got done that were logged and it had my item level at the time. That is actually really useful because I didn't know what my item level is whenever I upload videos. That was probably a big fault of mine, so I'm sorry about that. It would probably be useful to know my equipped item level as I kept releasing videos. That way people could compare their damage. But one of the fights that I felt like was pretty single target DPS-y is third boss in Blackrock Hold. That one is pure single target with no other factors. The only thing that affects your DPS on that fight is if you're using a defensive to survive the charge, so you do lose some time on damage for that. Other than that, I do think King Deepbeard in Eye of Ashara is a good indicator because it is also purely single target, not as much movement. At the time in July, I don't think I knew about mind bombing the crabs, the little critters around the area. Those can proc your Sefus, so I started doing that later on in my videos, but since I didn't know about it in July, I think that was a pretty good indicator of what I was able to put out. I think for one of the videos back in July for that, I think I did like 800k DPS without mind bombing. So I think if you were able to mind bomb, you could probably pull around 900k. I do have a Blackrock Hold video out from around that time where I did just over 1 million, I think. If it's helpful for people to know kind of like the damage to eye level ratio, it might take a little bit of digging. I can link my WoW progress, and if you'd like, just take a look through the patch versions and then look at the dungeons I've completed and the item level I was at. I have been uploading videos for Mythic Plus since the start of Legion, so you should be able to find a dungeon in association with an item level as I kept progressing while playing the game. So hopefully there will be a time where I was doing Mythic Plus with an eye level that was around yours, so you can get a good idea for what damage you should be doing. Yes, if you have higher ping, it can be extremely annoying. I personally cannot play with ping over 100 and feel happy, but something like higher ping, if it messes with your rotation quite a bit, I know that if I ever had latency, and there were times where oh hi Rai. There were times where I had higher latency and I would end up using an extra global on Mind Flay. I feel like I kind of did that kind of often because if I'm spamming a button and I maybe didn't queue up Void Bolt at the right time for the game to register that as the next spell to actually cast, then there would be times where I would have that one global of Mind Flay before my Void Bolt, and that's not always so good because Void Bolt is a pretty short cooldown, so ideally you want to use it the second it's off cooldown. But yeah, if you guys have anything else that you kind of want me to dive into here, so it is much easier to kind of judge someone's gameplay with a video, of course, because like I said, on a training dummy, I don't think it's always the best indicator just because you just stand there and do nothing. And it's not entirely realistic because every single fight requires some form of movement. And I think it does take a certain level of skill and understanding of the fight where you anticipate and you move accordingly. So basically you kind of plan out your movements. That way, when you actually have to deal with a mechanic, you move very little. So for example, for a fight like Fallen Avatar, I would always inch myself in between globals away from him when he's doing the large AoE damage cast. There were also times where I felt like you didn't necessarily need to use Dispersion that fight specifically for a mechanic. So if you wanted to, you could always just stay within range and just use Dispersion to negate that damage. but I do still think that for stuff like that, it's always best to move accordingly. I think the more familiar you are with a fight, the less you have to move, and then the better your damage will be. Also, I don't know if this is not something that some people already do, but I feel like I tend to use Power Word Shield for one global, and I cover a lot of distance because I get that movement speed boost. So if you ever need to move further than just a tiny bit, always use that global on Power Word Shield for the boost. I think it's useful. I think it's extremely beneficial. And I think usually in that case, you end up only needing to use that one global for the distance you're trying to cover. And that's great because sometimes if you don't have that boost, you are walking pretty slow. So I think there's probably other things I can really cover, but I'm on my lunch break. I wanted to just record this really quick and get it out for anyone that could find it to be useful. So please, please, please ask me more questions, anything you want, and I will always get back to you. I promise.